Hey, Monday Night Man, I am so glad you're here. Let's get right into this thing. 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. Man, the power and the love part's great. The self-discipline is maybe why we need more courage in our lives, because it does take courage to discipline ourselves. The Bible is a book of moral courage, moral fortitude, and moral strength. And while the world is obsessively leaning into negativity, just like all around, all the time, all the voices, all the stuff, all the noise, it's just negative, negative, negative. And you know what? You and I, as followers of Jesus Christ, as men who partake of this word, we are not just leaning into, but we are fully persuaded that Jesus Christ is able, that we are in Him, He is in us, and we live the positive life of faith, because Jesus Christ is the undefeated champion. Amen? Undefeated. I love that. Hey, here's what the Word says about you and me. I just wanted to go through a couple affirmations real quick before we get into some of the parts of the book. Session 9, Chapter 8, Workbook Lesson 10. I know it's just kind of messed that thing up a few times, but that's where we're at today. I know that for sure. But here's what it says in Romans 8. I am free from the law of sin and death. 1 Corinthians 2 and Philippians 2. I have the mind of Christ. Philippians 4. I have the peace of God that surpasses all understanding. The Spirit of God that lives in me is greater than the enemy in the world. Here's another one. Philippians. God supplies all of my needs according to His riches and glory in Christ Jesus. Ephesians 6. In all circumstances, I live by faith in God and extinguish all the flaming darts, attacks of the enemy. We talked last week about Polycarp, and one of the things I mentioned off camera, I didn't have time to mention it to you last week, was Polycarp, when they burned him at the stake. The oral traditions are that he didn't burn. He was like John the Baptist, his mentor, or excuse me, like St. John, his mentor, that when he was put into boiling oil, it says he came out with skin like a baby. They couldn't kill him. And they say the flames came up around Polycarp and he didn't burn. And so one of the soldiers threw a spear, pierced him, and he began to bleed out. And it says the blood began to extinguish the flames. And what was left was the blood of the martyr. I mean, talk about courage. In all circumstances, I live by faith in God and extinguish all the flaming attacks of the enemy. Philippians 4, I can do all things through Christ Jesus who gives me strength. Romans 8, I am more than a conqueror through Him who loves me. You should take scriptures that you love. I read these affirmations over myself all the time, privately. Not just when I'm praying with my wife or praying with my children or whatever it may be, or praying over somebody else. I read them over myself. So find those scriptures that bring encouragement to yourself. Write them down. Put them in the notes section of your phone. Pull them up just before you walk into a sales meeting or just before you get on the job and driving a forklift or whatever it is that you do. But write these things down. I'm more than a conqueror through Him who loves me. In Romans 8, the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in me. Bam! Courage. Mark 6, we see this picture of courage when Jesus comes walking on the water and they all cry out in fear. But Jesus said, don't be afraid, take courage, I am here. Why do we take courage? Because He's here. And He's in the boat. Take courage. Hope is alive. Hope has a name. Hope's name is Jesus. Number 2, we live in the midst of a broken world. And in this chapter we deal with, and in this chapter 8, we deal with suicide. Dr. Cole talked about it very openly in this, that it takes courage to help others through issues. It takes courage for us to admit need. In fact, I'll talk about that in a moment. But the plague of suicide is huge in our culture, and we can't look away because the stats aren't just numbers, they're people. 134 suicides in America, where I live, every day. 134 every day. Almost 1 million suicides, self-death, every year worldwide. 70% of those suicides are men. It's the second leading cause of death for teenagers. In the last 20 years, the rate for 10 to 14-year-olds, from 10 to 14, 10 to 14. A great friend whose brother's 13-year-old daughter hung herself. It's been 6 weeks ago now. And they're devastated. And in some ways, they can look back and see that it was coming, but they didn't see it coming. And the suicide rate for 10 to 14-year-olds has tripled in the last 20 years. And I believe it's a negative media that's around us. And in the harshly bipolar world in which we live. Every year, over 1 million people attempt self-death in the United States. High-profile pastors. In fact, here's a photo of Andrew Stockline. Successful young pastor. Wife, 3 awesome little boys. On August the 25th, 2018, he ended his life. In fact, next week, I'm going to talk about something that happened the very next day, that same year. The very next day. August 25th, ended his life. His wife, Kayla Stockline, my wife and I and others, friends of ours, follow her social media because she's been remarkable how she's worked through it and now how she's writing books and writing in a way that helps others. Kayla had 3 little boys. They had 3 sons. And she has become an advocate for emotional healing. And her courage has spoken volumes to those of us who have followed her. She's done it well. She's done very well. But there have been many, many pastors, many leaders. Many of us probably have a friend or a friend's son, daughter that have had a brush with suicide or been in it. There was a documentary called The Bridge I watched years ago. It won a number of awards, came out in mid-2000s, 2006. And it's called The Bridge. And it was a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, and this filmmaker, British-American filmmaker, took a crew of 12 people and they shot 24 hours a day of the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, because there were so many suicides happening there. And so they were going to do a documentary on that. They quickly became, number 1, people, and number 2, filmmakers, in the sense that when they saw somebody attempting suicide and they could reach them, they would try to stop them. But they just kept the film rolling and they filmed it. And then they would do interviews with friends and loved ones. And they interviewed this one man who had actually lived through it. And when they interviewed him, I'll never forget this interview, because they said, "What were you thinking as you stood on the bridge?" And they showed a picture of him. And he's standing on the bridge. And he turns, so his back, and he just leans back and falls. And they said, "What were you thinking at that exact moment?" He says, at that moment as I'm standing there, he said, "It's like I quit thinking." He said, and then when I leaned back and I was no longer touching the bridge and I started falling, he said, "I did think something." The interviewer said, "What?" He said, "I thought to myself, I've just made the worst decision of my entire life." The worst decision of my entire life. That's what he thought. See, I believe there are those of us, there are men and women who are fighting the fight of faith right up to the moment that their feet leave the railing of the bridge. I don't believe it's the unpardonable sin. I was taught that as a kid. I don't believe it is. I believe God's grace is bigger than anything you and I could ever imagine that it is. I mean, think about a guy who imbibes too much alcohol. Let's say, follower of Christ, and then he gets in a situation, he's had too much alcohol, he has a heart attack, something else may happen. Think about that. And right then, bam, he dies. What? Okay, now he just sinned. He was drunk. He had a heart attack and died. Is he going to hell? I mean, come on. These are things you and I have to think about because we're dealing with these things every day. I'm not condoning it. I'm saying I understand it, and I understand the issue. I'm not lessening it. It is a tragedy. I understand the issues people face. See, with the Christian Men's Network, one of the things we're speaking to is not only the courage, and I'll talk about it in a moment, to face reality. In fact, I'll talk about it next week. I don't have time today. But one of the things, remember the whole 5 things in the first couple of weeks we talked about, the reasons you have courage to face reality was one of the key things. It was the first thing, courage to face reality. And I think for many of us, one of the things we do with Christian Men's Network is kind of bring alive our hearts and spirits to face the reality of, hey, I've just moved into a dangerous place. I need help. That's one of the other things, one of the 5 things. Courage to get help. Courage to admit need. Courage to get help. Courage to face reality. I think it takes courage, but I also think it takes courage to speak to somebody about where they're at. And I know sometimes what happens is we back off and they go, well, you know, he's trying to get some stuff together, trying to live his life. You know, I'm not going to inject myself in that person's life. But I got to tell you, just go ahead and do it. Help that man. Help that person. There are many things online. Suicide also is prevalent. What we do with Christian Men's Network is helping a man's character and building his life so that he becomes a dad who stays and a dad who loves and a dad who mentors and disciples his children. You realize fatherlessness is the leading cause of drug abuse and depression in teens, and depression is the leading cause of teen suicide. So it's all linked, right? It all comes back to, are we men of the word or not? The fact is, there are people, friends of ours, who are people of the word. See, I would never take Wilson and Stockline and some of the others who have died by self-death over the last couple of years, just over the last few months. A couple of key men. I know they're men of the word. They're fighting a fight, and I'm their brother. So we need to recognize the issue, read materials, be knowledgeable, go online. There's a lot of tools now. Help someone get help. Don't be passive. Don't back off. There's National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. There's a number of Christian organizations. Have the courage to make a difference in someone else's life. All right? Just have the courage to go for it. Number 3, friends. Because this is where most of us, kind of iron sharpens iron. This is where we build our emotional health. Friends. And let me give us a little picture. This is Elijah, that great prophet. He just had this incredible victory where he'd called fire from the sky. I mean, think about it. This guy not only had raised somebody from the dead previous, but he had been in this battle with the 450 prophets of Baal. He called fire from the sky to consume the sacrifice. Man, that's a pretty heavy guy. Bruce is with me again, of course, and Jesse behind the camera, and David on graphics. But think about a man who's so strong, he can call fire from the sky. Dude, that's a prayer life right there. And yet this man finds himself running for his life because in 1 Kings chapter 19, the queen, whose prophets he killed, has put a contract out on his life. And now he's tired, he's down, he's exhausted, and he runs for his life. He doesn't go hang out with some guys and have a coffee. He runs for his life. It says he's sitting in his cave in the rain under a tree. And he says he's alone and isolated. He's in fear. He's disconnected and depressed. And that's a pattern. That's a pattern. Isolation, fear, disconnection, depression. It's a pattern. And finally he says, God, just kill me. I'm the only one left that's serving you. And God says, no, I have 7,000 other men who are true to me right here in this kingdom. So get up. Let's get back to work. Here's my question. Why didn't Elijah know some of those men? Yeah. Where was Elijah with those? If there were 7,000 other men, and Elijah's this guy who's very well known, why didn't he know some of those men? And why didn't he go hang out with them? And why didn't some of those men show up? Yeah. Why? Because Elijah had isolated himself. And isolation will lead to death. Isolation will lead to the death of a dream, death of a relationship, and it can lead to actual death. Stagnation, that's why we need brotherhood. Hashtag CMN brotherhood. We do this all the time. Hashtag CMN brotherhood. See, we were designed by God with certain chemicals in our body, dopamine, the most powerful. You know that there are things in life that bring dopamine rushes, but it was particularly designed for us to be connected with our wives. That dopamine rush when you're connected with her, when you're intimate. When my wife walks in the room, there's a thing that happens, there's that dopamine rush. It's a very powerful chemical, satisfaction and pleasure that God gave us, and it's called, Nancy Houston calls it the marriage chemical. But the second most powerful is what we could call the compadre chemical, that brotherhood chemical. It's oxytocin. It's that chemical secreted when people bond. And for men, it's when we're working together, getting something done. That's why men who have been on a basketball team together, that's why men who have been in battle together, it's why men who have climbed a mountain together or surfed together or built a house together, there's a bonding that happens. I think of my friend Charlie when I see him, which I probably see him once every 3 or 4 years. But he and I were in the jungles of Nicaragua together, and we had snuck, it's a long story, but we had snuck out. It was during the Sandinista Revolution. And we're out in the jungle trying to get a story on the revolution and the troops, and we could hear the fighting, and so we're trying to get over there to take some photos and see if we can get some interviews. And Charlie Tudor, I won't name him, but that's his name. And Charlie and I went out there, and we got a flat tire in this old beat-up rental car that we had. It was the only thing available back then. This is in the 70s, the Sandinista Nicaraguan Revolution. And now we're stuck, and we are like, all of a sudden, we're in fear. I mean, and we take the camera that we had, this remote camera, and we shot each other doing our last will and testament. Because we're thinking, hey, if we don't get out of here, somebody will find this, and it'll get to our families. So we did that, and I watched the car. He went down to a farmhouse, scared the people half to death. The guy came up with a tractor, because there was a spare tire, but there was no jack. And so we used the tractor to get the car up, messed it up a little bit, didn't matter, got the tire changed, headed back out of the battle, snuck back into the hotel under cover of darkness because we were being watched by the revolutionary Sandinistas. And so we snuck back in. And then I go, hey, give me the tape. He goes, what do you need? I said, I'm not going to tell anybody about this. I'm going to destroy the tape. It was not a smart thing to do with 2 little kids at home. Anyway, but those are the things, Charlie and I, whenever we see each other, like I said, we only see each other every few years. You know what? It's like, hey, dude, bro, we like hug. Like we man hug, man. We're like, hey, bro, how are you? You doing okay? Yeah, I'm good, man. There's like, hug. Why? Because we went through something together that most people have never gone through together, And it was that connecting, and that's what brotherhood is about. See, the ministry to men can be the result of purpose, communication, strategy, honor, work, but fundamentally, the ministry to men is about friendship, building friends. It's not just about reading books or getting more information. It's about using these tools to build us larger and better as we're brothers to those around us. Amen. Amen? In fact, the power of the life of Abraham as a man was he was called a friend of God. In John 15, Jesus said, I don't call you slaves anymore because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends. You're my friends. I've told you everything. Abraham was called the friend of God. And that was the power of his life, personal, intimate. See, we were made for friendship. We were made for oxytocin. When God created you and me, this is so powerful. When God created the world, he spoke a word, right? Bam, bam, stuff's happening, mountains and the ocean and all this stuff. And then birds, and he's speaking words. But when it came to mankind, he leaned down and with his hands created mankind. And then pulled us close and breathed in us, because you and I were designed to be intimate with Father God. Amen. He designed us for intimacy with each other, to be brothers, to love each other. Covenant, that's friendship. Hashtag CMN brotherhood. Man, this is good. In fact, we talked in another session about choosing the right friends. Okay, go on Monday Night Men and type in Monday Night Men on YouTube and go in there, find all the materials, find the session on friends, choosing the right friends. There's so many powerful tools to access. You know, a couple notes about friends. A friend says, hey, good word, even when it wasn't. A friend is someone who knows everything about you and still likes you. A friend always brightens the room when they enter. A friend always brightens the room when they enter. Others brighten it when they leave. I've always loved that. Number 4 is freedom of choice. Courage to choose to be a courageous man or choose to be whatever. You can have the courage to choose to be a courageous man or just whatever, because even not making a choice is a choice. Choice is the greatest freedom you have. When a dictator takes over a country, what he limits is your power of choice. Okay? That's taking away freedom. Freedom is not just doing anything you want to do. Freedom is being able to choose your life. You are free to choose, but once you make the choice, you become the servant to the choice. In other words, you're responsible for that choice. You know, the problem with many of the things in our church today, I'm going to go to page 126 and just read this real quick. The problem for many of us is that we've come to know about God, but don't know Him. Come to know about Jesus, but don't know Jesus. And Dr. Cole in the book called it streetwise. He called it streetwise and churchwise, and he talked about how streetwise is profane, hard of heart. You con your parents, you're manipulative, you do things to impress others. That's a kid on the street. Okay, he's deceptive in spirit, he's insolent in manner, which means he's rough in his language, refuses constituted authority. And then he said, now the church, here's the problem in the church. The church-wise young man, he's talking about the street-wise, profane, hard of heart, con parents, manipulative, do things to impress, deceptive in spirit, insolent in manner. He says the church-wise is religious, not profane, but it's hard of heart, cons parents, manipulative, do things to impress, deceptive in spirit, insolent in manner. The only difference between one's religious, the other is profane. But the character of that person, of that young man, hasn't changed. That's called being a hypocrite. You know, it's talking about righteousness, but not living it. And I've got to tell you, in our culture today, I want to tell you, I have just had it with whiners and posers. I'm just done. No more excuses. I'm just done with guys whining about stuff. You know, particularly living in a first world culture, I'm tired of pretty boys and strutting rock star preachers who can play the crowd and play the chords. I think sometimes, this is harsh. Maybe this is harsh. I think that the addiction to skinny jeans has caused an addiction to skinny faith. Just saying. I don't have a problem with skinny jeans. I have a problem with skinny faith. But I think the fact that we've gotten so locked into, you know, like, why do you have an Instagram about the shoes of, you know, famous preachers? What's it called? Preacher shoes or something like that? Preacher sneakers. Preacher sneakers. See, I wrote something down here. I wrote something down late last night. I'd rather have a man with tobacco juice sliding down his chin who can tell me the truth than a man who looks good, talks good, says all the right stuff, and has never met truth, has lived his life apart from truth, knows how to live it, talk it, pose it, hasn't seen truth in it since it sailed away in the breath of God's blasting presence. Give me a man who can change a tire and change his direction. Give me a man who can make strong coffee and make a strong stand. Give me a man who can write a movie script and help write the shipwreck of another man's life. Give me men like that, men of courage. That's what we need in this world today. Whether it's running a forklift or a warehouse or a company or a nation or a family or a church, wherever we are as men, you and I, we need to have the courage to live in truth and to live in reality and to lead as a servant. Just don't give me an excuse. Listen, don't give me an excuse about, hey, I don't have enough time, I don't have this, don't have that. Because right now, particularly you and me, you're watching this on a computer or a phone or a tablet, and we've got first world problems when 80% of the men in the world don't have the opportunity you and I have right now. You're living better than most of the world. Don't give me any excuses. Well, I can't this way, I can't do this. Just listen. Here's a guy who should have had great excuses. His name's Booker T. Washington. Even his autobiography he wrote is called Up from Slavery. Born in 1851 to a woman just named Jane. And he's born in slavery in Virginia. His dad's named Washington. His dad gets to West Virginia, sends for his family. They get there. He's raised in West Virginia. This is a guy who had every excuse there was. And yet Booker T. Washington built Tuskegee Institute, which is today Tuskegee University. That's where the Tuskegee Airmen came from. That's where others have come out of. Amazing what this man did. And yet, because he didn't take any excuses, he believed that we needed to build strength and faith in the lives of young men and women. And he was in particular in his first writing saying we need to raise up young black men in the face of prejudice and persecution. This guy didn't stay in West Virginia and start a school. He went to Alabama and started a school in 1881. And if you know anything about what was happening with the laws at that point, in fact, let me just read a couple things here. This is what Booker T. Washington said. I resolved that I would not permit any man, no matter what his color might be, to narrow and degrade my soul by making me hate him. Wow. I'm not going to let a man degrade me, make me narrow by making me hate him. With God's help, I believe I have completely rid myself of any ill feeling toward the Southern white man for any wrong he may have inflicted upon my race. I pity from the bottom of my heart any individual who is so unfortunate as to get into the habit of holding race prejudice. Dude, and then he said this, while a great deal of stress is laid, in fact, David, let's put this one up off the script. While a great deal of stress is laid upon the industrial side of the work at Tuskegee, we do not neglect or overlook in any degree the religious and spiritual side. The school is strictly undenominational, but it is thoroughly Christian. And the spiritual training of the student is not neglected. Our preaching service, prayer meetings, Sunday school, Christian Endeavor Society, Young Men's Christian Association, and various missionary organizations testify to this. And he did this according, now listen to this from Wikipedia. This is the backdrop to what Booker T. Washington did. Oh, and I made this note. George Washington Carver was a student here. I mean, there were some amazing men that came through this place, stalwart men, courageous men, the DNA of Booker T. Washington. And here's the backdrop to what he was doing. And this is from Wikipedia. The continuing expansion of black education took place against the background of increased violence against blacks in the South, after Democrats regained power in state governments and imposed white supremacy in society. They instituted legal racial segregation and a variety of Jim Crow laws after disfranchising most blacks by constitutional amendments and electoral rules from 1890 until 1964. This is the backdrop against this man's courage. And if you read over and over, if you read his autobiography, Up from Slavery, you know this guy had depth of character. There was prayer that went into this. He prayed over it. Faced reality, was strong. Man, that's why I love being a part of this, because we're building men of courage. Let me show you a photo from Brazil. I'm going to show you a series of photos. Bam, 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 bam. David, just go through them. This is Brazil. There are almost 7,000 groups now going through Courage, Real Man, Christian Men's Network materials, almost 7,000 Christian Men's Network small groups across the nation of just Brazil right now. Marcos Pol and brother George Nishimura and all of our great friends there, well done. Way to go, Brazil. Strong stuff happening. You can meet him coming up in November I don't know when you're watching this, but no, first weekend in November every year, Lions Roar, the Global Summit on Biblical Masculinity, put on by the Christian Men's Network in Dallas. So go to our website, you'll find stuff about that. But I'm so fired up about what's happening. Hey, don't forget the Brave Men podcast. This Courage book is on audio. It's a number of different places. And we are fully and totally committed to growing the local church. So fired up, passionate about it. Thank you for being with us today on this walk through the book, Courage. And thank you for being a partner and for the gifts and offerings that keep this on the air, keep it going in 134 countries around the world, and all the translations we're doing right now of the materials. Number 7, John 16, 31, 33. Jesus said, "The Father is with me. I've told you all this so that trusting me, you will be unshakable and assured, deeply at peace. In this godless world, you will continue to experience difficulties, but take courage. I've conquered the world." Matthew 6, "Our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen." Hope is alive. Hope has a name. Hope's name is Jesus. Stay strong and be a man of courage. Hashtag CMN Brotherhood. I'll see you next time. God bless.